Lingiari. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It gives me great pleasure to be participating in this debate and to once more, as I will, vote for marriage equality in this country, as I did when this matter last came to be voted in this chamber in September of 2012, when I, along with 41 other colleagues, supported a similar bill then, and I will be assuredly voting for this bill today. And I indicated well before the marriage survey was undertaken by the Bureau of Census that I would be voting that way in this chamber should we be given the opportunity. I have not changed my view and I will be voting for this legislation. I do want to make a few comments, and I'll just, in short though, express my disappointment at some of the way in which the Prime Minister characterised this debate, as if it were somehow or another a creature of the government. It is not a creature of the government. It is a creature of the Parliament. I think the Prime Minister and the way he expressed himself about this being the fourth from the coalition, effectively, was very ungracious. And I don't think it properly accounted for the way in which this Parliament is seeking to deal with this legislation. I want to commend my mate sitting over there, gruff old bugger that he is, the member for Leichhardt, for steadfastly advocating for this position for many years against the forces within his own party. And it's not because of the party, it's because of him and others like him in his party and people across the Parliament with similar views that we have this legislation. This is a cross-parliamentary piece of legislation. It does not reside with the government. So I say to the Prime Minister, think again about the way you're portraying this debate. It is not fair, it is not reasonable, and it's unacceptable. And I would say to those who have, as the member for Cook has just done, say to us that people of faith, and his description of people of faith and how they need to be supported in seeking amendments to this legislation to ensure religious freedom. Well, there are many people of faith in this Parliament who oppose that view. I am one of them. I'm a Catholic. I was raised a Catholic. I still go to church, not as regularly as I perhaps should, but often. And I accept the proposition that it's okay to have different views. And I note the words that have been in the public domain by Frank Brennan, referred to earlier by the member for Fowler. It is possible to see this as an issue of equality, not faith. It is a matter of equality, not faith. It's a matter of recognising the rights of every single person to share the same rights as every other person, regardless of whether they are straight or a member of the LGBTIQ community. This has been a torturous discussion which has taken many years to arrive at this point. And I was actually encouraged yesterday, as you do, I shouldn't do it as often as I do really, but I was flicking through my emails yesterday and I noticed an email from the Bishop of Wangaratta in Victoria, the Anglican Bishop for Wangaratta, the Right Reverend A. John Parks AM, who authored a letter co-signed by 6 other bishops, Anglican bishops from across Australia, in which they pointed out why it was important for us to support this legislation. And if you'll bear with me, Mr Deputy Speaker, I want to read just 2 paragraphs of this letter. It was addressed to the Prime Minister. Given the magnitude of this task in the wake of the marriage proposal survey result, we commend the Marriage Amendment Definition and Religious Freedoms Bill 2017 to the Parliament for the following reasons. First, it has been available for many months, providing opportunity for scrutiny by all those concerned. Second, it responds directly to a detailed cross-party Senate report from February 2017. We observed that the Senate committee received extensive submissions from all stakeholders. Third, the bill has strong cross-party support. This is vitally important after a testing public debate. Fourth, the bill was passed by the Senate with an overwhelming majority. The next paragraph reads, the bill also confirms substantive benefits. It preserves the fabric of our anti-discrimination laws, which have been developed over half a century. These give expression to democratic values of equality and fairness. It also accords fulsome recognition of the religious rights and freedoms that underpin a democratic, plural and multicultural society. Hear, hear. And that is why, when it comes to proposing the motions to amend this legislation, I can't put it any better than those Anglican bishops. And that is why, when it comes to be voting on amendments to this legislation, I'll be opposing those amendments. And I encourage others with a similar view to do likewise. Because as those bishops have reminded us, this bill is about equality and fairness. Now, Mr Deputy Speaker, another element of this is the survey. Now, I'm on the record as being opposed to the survey from the get-go, and I still think it was a very flawed process, and I'll explain why in a moment. But the Prime Minister said, you know, if we'd have gone down the government's route as a proposed plebiscite, we would have had this all done and dusted. Well, if the government had the guts to bring the legislation to the Parliament straight after the last election, it would have well and truly been done and dusted without any plebiscite or public survey. If we did our job we are paid to do. We are paid to be here representing the people of this country, debating legislation every day. We don't send other pieces of legislation out to public surveys to find out what people think. We take it upon ourselves to accept the responsibility of having those debates in this Parliament, expressing a view and voting one way or another, and that's what we should have done here. Nevertheless, the survey was undertaken and, by all accounts, a large number of people participated. But I have to say, Mr Deputy Speaker, not in my electorate. I made the point, prior to this survey being carried out, that there would be great difficulty in my electorate. Lingiari, as you know, Mr Deputy Speaker, is 1.3 million square kilometres, 1.34 million square kilometres, covers all of the Northern Territory except Darwin and most of Palmerston, and includes a large number of Aboriginal communities. Not one of them, not one of those communities in the bush has household mail delivery. Not one. Most have a mail collection centre. And if you're lucky, you might actually get your mail at some point. That assumes, once you get it, that you can read it and understand what's in it. But of course we know that a very large number of Aboriginal people in my electorate have English as a second or third language, have a great deal of difficulty reading documents of the type that we would expect them to read in this sort of survey. And it's no surprise that the participation rate in Lingiari is only 50.1%. 50.1%. We know also that in terms of young Australians, and we've heard a lot about young Australians participating in this survey across the Parliament. Well, let me just say this. In my own electorate, the participation rate of 20 to 24-year-olds was only 39.3%. What does that tell you? That they were engaged? Of course not. That they understood what was happening? Of course not. Did they even know what was happening? Probably not. So I don't think this is a fair assessment of the views of my community. And I might say those views might have contradicted my own. But that is not the point here. This survey was supposed to elicit responses from all Australians. We've heard about the high levels of response rate nationally, but when I pointed out these concerns well before this survey took place, I was just poo-pooed. No, that's not going to happen. Well, we know what happened. We know that in some places there are allegations of people not understanding what the ballot papers were for, not understanding the nature of the debate, and some local communities where I understand their reports where surveys were burned due to a lack of understanding about what was being asked for. We also know of a report, one significant report which I believe happened, was of one family member going to the postal receipt centre and in front of the postal workers filling out large numbers of forms for their family members without authorisation. Now, I made those points at the time, and I won't say much more about them, but this was not something which was useful to the people of my communities. And, of course, there were a number of videos sent out by the Bureau, 13 different languages in my electorate. Well, there are about 100 languages in my electorate, so 13 is not going to help much. So I'm very concerned that this was a $122 million price that we needn't have paid in the first place. But having done it, we've now got what I think is a very good result, coincidentally, that so many people have put their vote yes. And I'm pleased that they've done so, but it accords, I know, with the majority view across this parliament. I want to thank those many members of my communities who have engaged themselves in this debate. In particular, I want to thank one of my own staff for the work she did and what they had to put up with. You know, there were very negative aspects to some of this campaigning. Graffiti saying it's gay is not okay, written on large signs along the Stewart Highway, not far from my electorate office. And this message hits hard to the kind of rainbow families, the loving rainbow families who have young children, and for vulnerable LGBTIQ people in our community. My electorate officer Kirsty Hunt and her partner of 18 years, Amber Sayers, who had needed to explain to their 6-year-old daughter on the way to the school that in fact it's okay to be gay. That was unnecessary. But I also understand the commitment, the absolute commitment and love that so many gay couples around this company have for one another that will now be recognised in law as a result of this, and allow them to do what every other Australian has got the right to do should they choose to do it. That's get married. By the way, I'm not married. But I've been in the same relationship for nearly 34 years and we've got 4 wonderful children. Now, I've got the right to marry. We've chosen not to. But I want every Australian to have the right that I've got, and that is, if they so choose, to marry. I want to extend my thanks to the Yes campaigners in Lingiari, in the very small communities, across diverse communities across the territory, particularly Andrew Addy and Maya Newell in Alice Springs, and Pat Honan in the Top End, the Gay Pride Committee and the organisers of the inaugural Darwin Gay Pride March. I also want to thank 2 people who I know will see great virtue and celebrate this day, the day we pass this legislation. 2 Nhulunbuy women, Carly Scott and her partner Pep Thielen. I've spoken to Carly. I know how wonderfully important this is to her, as it is to so many people I know and have known over generations. Wonderful people who have gay partners or members of the LGBTQI community who want to participate and have a loving relationship and be recognised in the law, and they should be allowed to do so. This bill will do it. I commend it to the House.